So thanks for joining. My name is Zach Hodson. I'm with the Salvation Army, and I also get to chair the New York City Board of Directors with I.O. Harrington of LES Ready. This morning, we have two guests with us, Valerie Brown of United Policyholders, I believe the title was Senior Project Manager or Program Manager, excuse me. Important to me, I learned this morning, she's also San Diego VOAD Chair. And then we have the legendary Elizabeth Malone of NHS Brooklyn, and both will take us through the post-disaster insurance process. I won't say much more. I'll turn it over to Valerie so we can get started.
Thank you for having me today. I'm going to share one item on my screen, and I'm going to apologize now for the dogs that they've had their walk and they're going to interrupt us periodically while I'm talking. So my apologies for that. Just ignore any British Lab guest appearances. So I'm going to share two things. The first is going to be, and I know you've all seen it before, but it's just pointing out where insurance intersects with FEMA. So I'm going to share the sequence of delivery. As Zachary said, I'm Valerie Brown. I'm the Senior Program Officer of United Policyholders. So the thing to bear in mind with FEMA and FEMA appeals and insurance for any disasters in FEMA sequence of delivery, it's this part right here. They have to follow the sequence of delivery. So if they have insurance, they must go through that before they can go to anything else. So it is, when you're routing people through there, they've got to go here before they can go to the next part of the sequence. And so let me start my PowerPoint now. Okay, here we go. So a little bit about United Policyholders. We've been we're a national nonprofit. We're a national VOAD partner agency. We've been doing this since 1991 with Oakland Hills wildfires, and our goal is to serve as a voice and information resource for insurance consumers in all 50 states. Our expertise is insurance, claims, the legal part of this, buying. As I mentioned earlier, we're not for profit. The not for sale tagline means simply that we do not take money from insurance companies. We're supported by donors, grants, and volunteers. And then we serve as a respected voice for consumers in courts and legislatures and public policy forums. We have a program called Roadmap to Recovery. These are some of the tools from it that we use. This is, we stood up our Hurricane Ida Disaster Help Library. Here it is on our website. Here are the resources that we have available to you there. We have three programs, like I said, the Roadmap to Recovery, which is where we work with people post-disaster to solve their insurance problems that come up. We also work with disaster case managers and the long-term recovery groups in areas that we're funded to respond to. Our Roadmap to Preparedness program takes the lessons learned from the recovery programs and helps people be better prepared, having contents inventory, make sure they have adequate insurance, all of those things. And then that Advocacy and Action program is actually the keynote program in our portfolio, and that's where we actualize improving where consumers stand in the courts of law in handling their claims. So, the first one is that individualized self-help resources, and the second one feeds into that. But that Advocacy and Action is really where we make a change. Back to the Roadmap to Recovery program, I think I've already mentioned this. We view ourselves as a team player. We work with everyone in this space to help consumers. So so starting with the premise. So why would people register for FEMA if they have insurance? The primary reason is that FEMA has carved out space in here as long as you can avoid duplication of benefits under the Stafford Act, they might still be eligible for FEMA help in these circumstances. And so these are key to let people know that if they, even if they have insurance, they still should apply because they don't know when these things are going to happen. They're not going to know when they're going to run out of additional living expenses. They're not going to know until they get into their settlement if it covered their needs, right? Just to recap, who can register for FEMA, they must be a US citizen, a non-citizen national, or qualified alien, which is anybody with a green card. One thing to bear in mind here, they would be asked to sign a declaration in the release to say, I am a US citizen or qualified alien. If they cannot sign that, but they have another adult household member who's eligible, they can sign it. FEMA says they do not collect information regarding that person's status. The other caveat is if they have a minor child who is a US citizen or qualified alien, they can apply on their behalf. But this is the information from FEMA's website. I'm just sharing this. I know this is a big concern for people post-disaster, making sure everyone can get help. And so these are the ways FEMA allows that piece to happen. The other piece to bear in mind is the applicant's primary home must have been what was damaged or destroyed. No secondary homes can apply for registering for FEMA. And for the primary home, they could be the owner or the renter. There can be multiple renters in a dwelling. They just have to have proof they live there. These are the fact sheets that can provide you more information for that if you need more information on that. And these are the potential insurance gaps that would be FEMA eligible. So rental assistance, when they run out of their additional living expenses, being able to extend it while they're waiting for their home to be repaired. They can apply for that. Lodging expense reimbursement, those are hotels and short-term lodging. Home repair assistance, that could be the residence itself, utilities, privately owned access roads, and then assistance with specific ADA defined accessibility repairs. And these, the last bullets here, wells, septic, bridges, and roads, these are all for privately owned properties. And so these are the types of things that if insurance isn't paying for that, they can make the case that they would like to file an appeal, file for FEMA and get reimbursed for that expense up to their FEMA max. So the next steps always file your insurance claim, whether it's homeowners, renters, flood, or both as soon as possible. Register before the deadline. I saw that your deadline for FEMA registrations has been extended to December 5th. Please get that messaging out to people. And just make it very clear to them, even if they have insurance, FEMA is going to additionally deny their request. And that's okay, because in the letter they send them, they're going to say, we deny because you have insurance, and they're going to ask for more information. And it tells them how to appeal and all of that information. And so that's very important that they respond to that, not toss that letter away, which is what I find normally happens post-disaster. People with insurance are encouraged to apply with FEMA. They get that denial because nobody set their expectations that this is just part of the process. A lot of people get frustrated and throw it away. And then, after the year has passed, the 12 months has passed, then they're finding out, I could have done this with FEMA if I had known. The next part, they're going to be sent an SBA application, and they must complete and return it. Again, goes back to that sequence of delivery. It's part of the registration process. If they're denied by FEMA, by SBA, they get referred back to FEMA for assistance. And then that appeal letter and documentation to show your insurance coverage was not enough and you want to be considered for help. That is that last step they're doing with that appeal. Just to touch on these, the SBA pieces I mentioned briefly. Actually, let me go back to the other slide. So there's the SBA Dependent Other Needs Assistance, ONA. And so for this one, these are people who would not qualify for a loan, or they're only going to be approved for a partial loan insufficient to meet their needs. These are the types of expenses that they would be eligible for when they're sent back to FEMA, that's other needs assistance. There is also a bucket called the non-SBA dependent ONA, and this type of assistance can be awarded regardless of their SBA disaster loan status. So funeral assistance, medical disaster, childcare, and there's another bucket called other items that is actually defined by your state. I want to touch really briefly on how, if you're helping someone, how you would determine if there were potential gaps that would make them eligible for FEMA, potentially if they have a gap. And so I want to just run you through briefly. This is a homeowner's insurance policy. This bucket C, coverage C here, personal property. Some insurance policies will not have anything, or they'll have a very minimum amount. And so if there's no coverage here, that would be a space that they could apply, be looking at applying for FEMA. The other would be loss of use. So again, if their insurance is insufficient to meet their needs, or they don't have anything here, these are two areas that they would be able to apply for. And this is on a declarations page at the beginning of the policy. A full policy would be, anywhere from 30 to 100 pages. Their declarations page might be from 3 to 12. It'll have, just the summary of their renewal information, but usually on their first or second page of the Dex page, it will have this type of information that you can, very simply look at and see how much they have. And if they have a gap here that you can identify, so that you're setting expectations with them that it's something that they might be eligible for. And then for a renter's policy, this is a great example that just shows for personal property. While they had $10,000 in contents, most homeowners, most renters, that will not cover the personal property they lost. So there's a gap there that they could be applying for. Loss of use is another term for additional living expenses. And this 9,000, I don't think is going to go very far for a replacement apartment or temporary apartment in your area. So you can see that this would make the point that they need help in their temporary living until they can get back, until the home that they were living in and renting is repaired. Just want to thank you. And this is our general website here, and I'm going to end my show. And I will hang on for any questions that anybody has and turn it over to Elizabeth.
Okay. Zach, do you want me to start? But first of all, I want to thank Valerie and mention that United Policyholders has been my go-to organizations for claims information, for how to negotiate claims. I have a couple of their handouts with their logo on it that I send out on a regular basis to homeowners who have insurance questions about claims. Such a dependable and community oriented organization. So very much a trusted partner for NHS Brooklyn, that's for sure. What I want to do now is get into some more of the fun parts about what is happening with Ida and the insurance situation. So let's take a look at my presentation. Make sure I can bring it up here. Okay, we're going to start from the beginning. Okay, all right. Most of you, I think, know NHS Brooklyn. We were very active in the Sandy recovery. We are Brooklyn based, but we will serve virtually anyone that we can help. And we're a grassroots 501(c)(3). Our offices are closed to the public, but all of our programs are up and running. And actually, I will hope to get to our website at the end so you can see where we are doing flood and homeowners and renters insurance seminars on a regular basis. We've been doing Ida recovery seminars as well, and we'll continue that as needed. But I have a recurring renters insurance and homeowners insurance seminars, plus of course the flood risk seminars. And that's me. I highly recommend you use my email when you want to reach out to me. I'm just simply better at email than I am at the phone. Okay, so property insurance and disaster recovery. The property policy, and I thank Valerie for showing you a declaration page. The standard property insurance has 3 sections, one for structure, possessions, and then for liability. And 80% of disaster recovery resources come from private insurance, except Ida was very different. There's going to be many challenges in terms of what is insured by the private insurance industry and what of the recovery is going to be covered by insurance proceeds and insurance claims. Let me just quickly talk about the storm damage risks that may be covered on a standard homeowners or renters policy. The dwelling for renters, there is additions and alterations, which is the replacement for dwelling. Autos only if you have comprehensive coverage, because this would be storm damage, not a collision. And of course, the deductible would apply in your auto thing. Liability coverage is also something I just want to briefly mention because there are tenants and landlord issues that may arise over who's responsible for what. And I'm not going to go into trees. We can do a 3-day seminar on whose tree is it. But basically, if it hits your house, you can file an insurance claim. Okay. Now, in terms of liability, landlords are not responsible for Ida damage to their tenants' possessions. That's just really a flat statement that is almost always true. The landlord did not cause the problem. Therefore, the landlord is not responsible for the problem. Many tenants don't understand this. Many tenants do not know that they could have gotten renter's insurance, and 2020 hindsight, of course, is useless at this point. But liability, if you is part of a standard homeowner's policy. So if you run into a landlord who is being sued or the tenants are threatening to sue them, they just simply need to talk to their insurance company. They have coverage, and not only do they have coverage, they have lawyers. The insurance company will deal with any lawsuit brought against a homeowner, regardless of right or wrong, whether it happened on or off premises. It's a pretty blanket coverage, but it is very, very rarely used. Now, if you believe someone is liable for what they have done to you, for the harm to you, you contact their insurance company, and you may have to hire a lawyer. I don't expect a lot of liability lawsuits from this event, simply because no one is responsible for, well, we're all responsible for climate change. So raining 7 inches in 2 hours would really be considered an act of God. Unfortunately, it is our responsibility, but we'll get into that another time. Now, the IRIS event is going to be using the standard deductible on homeowners policies and renters policy. There is a windstorm deductible for category 1 windstorms, but Ida, they call it the remnants of Ida in this area. We're region 2, and NOAA redefined Ida as it came into our region as, I believe, a tropical storm. I think it might even gone down to a tropical depression, but it did not trigger that massive windstorm deductible. So any wind damage from Ida will have the standard deductible that's on the regular home, that's on the homeowner's policy. These are usually $1,000, $2,500. And this is important that that people who are doing an insurance claim understand that it's not worth it unless your damage is over the deductible, because you won't get any money, and that the deductible does not have to be spent up front. The health industry has confused us a great deal about deductibles because they use it for money that you have to spend. That is not a deduction, that's a copay, and they're migrating to that language. But in property insurance, the deductible is subtracted from the adjusted claim. You negotiate the claim, you come to an agreement, and at that point, your deductible is applied, it is subtracted. So if you have a $10,000 adjustment and a $1,000 deductible, you're going to get a check for $9,000. You do not have to spend the deductible, and you may not have to spend, be out of pocket at all if you can work it out. Now, one proviso here on the deductible is that sewer backup deductibles may be different from what is on the rest of the policy. Sewer backup is an endorsement, therefore it is not a standard coverage. We'll talk about that in a moment. And so it can, unlike other coverages, unlike the standard insurance coverages, endorsement coverages can vary from company to company. So people have to know what their particular sewer backup coverage is, if in fact they have this endorsement on their policy. And again, it is an option, not standard, okay? But the storm damage that is quite frequently covered on a standard property insurance depends on the level of coverage too. Most people will have the special form. That's the form you see on the farmers insurance commercials where all that weird stuff happens. All that weird stuff has happened and farmers insurance has paid out on it. But that was on what is called now the special form. It used to be called the all risk. It's a policy that is the most expensive, but that's not the reason really the insurance agents give it as their first quote. It's because it covers the most events that you can possibly happen. And 15 years down the road, you don't have to have a discussion about, well, you bought the basic policy and you don't have burst pipes coverage because you didn't buy it. So the special form is what agents will quote first. Other people do have discussed this with their agent and might have the broad form, which is the next level down, or the basic. And the basic, I mean, I have a board member who has basic coverage on her home in Brooklyn and has for decades. It's got 11 events. She's perfectly happy. She's paying a very little amount of insurance. But these are the things that would be covered under that policy in storm damage, not collapse, not falling objects, and not, the charge when they put the electricity back up and you get that burst. But that would be covered on the broad form. All of these would be covered on the special form, but Ida was a water event. Okay, so although I don't anticipate problems with insurance claims for wind damage or a wind-driven rain, because that is covered, water is a problem for insurance. It is the most common cause of claims, and there are many boundaries around it. So events that are not covered on any standard policy relating to water that we may see damage from Ida, first of all, is seepage. The ground is saturated. There are cracks in the foundation. Okay, it's below grade. Seepage happens below grade. Or if you're on a slab, it happens on the slab. And the water seeps in through cracks. That is not covered on any insurance policy, all right? Because it's considered a maintenance issue, not an event. Water backup, the backup of sewers and drains. This is, as I said, an endorsement that can be added to a policy, but it is not a standard coverage. So if the sewers and drains have backed up and caused a great deal of damage, like they did in Sandy, you can only file a claim with your homeowner's policy if you have this endorsement. And this is where we saw some people not get what they really were entitled to from their insurance companies after Sandy, because they told their agents, my basement is flooded, and flood is not covered on the homeowner's policy. So by using that word, instead of saying, well, I have water in my basement, it came through the backup of sewers and drains. And I ran into someone 2.5 years after Sandy who had water backup endorsement on his insurance policy, but he did what I just described. He told his homeowner's insurance agent that he had his basement was flooded by Sandy, and the agent told him the truth. You don't have coverage for flood, but they're not using the same language. So the words used in discussing insurance are incredibly important. They need to be specific, except where they get fuzzy, like water backup of sewers and drains. These can be interchangeable, but the point is the word flood is extremely specific. It is only rising tides or moving groundwater, and it is never on the homeowner's policy. It is only covered really in New York City by the National Flood Insurance Program because we are members of that program. So what we need to distinguish here in terms of helping people through this and whether or not they have a reasonable claim, a payable claim, is where did the water come from? And do you have the coverage on your homeowner's policy for where do you have the coverage? Okay. Okay, so let's go back up the sewers and drains. I have already gotten a report of a insurance company denying a sewer backup claim based on the notion that the sewer backup was caused by a flood and flood is excluded. Now, I find this very questionable, and I find it something that I really want to keep track of. We may have an advocacy issue here because after Sandy, many homes filed both flood claims and sewer backup claims and were paid on the sewer backup. Sometimes it was like split between the flood and the sewer backup, and they got part for flood and part for sewer backup. Sometimes it was just the sewer backup and they got paid on those claims, and the insurance companies did not push back saying, well, the sewer backup was caused by flood. Okay, so I really want to keep a track of this. I think it is questionable, and the New York State Insurance Department, or the Department of the New York State Department of Finances, which now includes the Insurance Department, may indeed end up pushing back on this, like they did after 9/11 when they pushed back on the word war. Claims were denied because the insurance company said, well, they declared war on us, and the Insurance Department redefined what happened and said terrorism is vandalism and malicious mischief. Okay, and everybody had coverage. So this idea that the sewer backup coverage is not going to be paid because the problem was caused by a flood, I want to see where this happens. I want to be, I do want people to let me know about this. And we really want to take a close look at this because we're talking thousands of dollars here for people. All right. So I am recommending that people challenge the denial in writing to the insurance company, that they notify the New York State Department of Finances asking for mediation. If they get enough of these phone calls, they may act. And I do want to see a copy. Now, a couple of issues on denials will come up. The issue of using the money from FEMA, I really should have put this at home repair assistance from FEMA. It has to be used to repair the home, the living area, to a safe and functional living condition. The FEMA aid for individual assistance is not to be used to repair the rental unit, okay? And of course, when you have a denial from FEMA based on your insurance claim, and then you say you appeal that and send in your denial letter so they can up your FEMA payout, that money, people have to understand what that money can and cannot be used for, okay? Because there's a possibility that SBA loans will be available to repair rental units, but the FEMA assistance, even if it's increased because of the damage done in the basement by the sewer backup, that money cannot be used to repair a below ground apartment because you're not allowed. You're supposed to repair your living area, all right? And also another issue that may come up for denials is that insurance risks are categorized at different levels, and a 1 and 2 family home, owner-occupied home, is considered one category of risk. When you add a third unit, you're now a 3-family home, even if you are still owner-occupied, you have changed the nature of the risk and you have changed risk categories. We had an incident just a couple months ago, I guess it was, where the homeowner had changed his basement into 2 different rental units, living units, bathrooms and kitchens, and did not tell his insurance company. So when he had a fire and they came to do the adjustment, to do the inspection, the adjuster's looking at a contract, insurance policy is a contract that says it's a 2-family home, and they're standing in front of a 4-unit building. The claim, not only was the claim denied, but the policy was null and void. They did not, in fact, have insurance. So a lot of people who have made this conversion from a 2-family into a 3-family did not tell the Department of Buildings because A, that would change their tax appropriation, and B, it's not a safe and legal apartment, so the Department of Buildings they don't want them in there. And they didn't tell their insurance company, thinking that A, I don't need to disclose it. I told them I have it's an owner-occupied home. I have insurance. What's the problem? They don't know this rate situation, this risk category situation. So they didn't bother. And also they might have been afraid that the insurance company would cancel their insurance or charge them more, which they would, or report them to the Department of Buildings. Now, the insurance companies do not do that. They do not care what your relationship to property taxes or building codes are when they insure you. They just want to know, what are they on the hook for? And if it's a 3-family, they need to know that. So we may see denials come through that are related to the fact that there's an undisclosed risk or material misrepresentation, and this can be kind of a sticky wicket if they get reinsured. Basically, the insurance policy is null and void. Okay, so that's going to be some of the insurance issues for the backup of sewers and drains. Now, what is concerning about Ida, before I go to the flood, is that a lot of the people who got damaged were the tenants in these basement apartments. They did not have renters insurance. They certainly probably did not have renters insurance with a backup of sewers and drains endorsement on it. And therefore their losses will not be covered by property insurance. Okay, the homeowners, of course, may have backup of sewers and drains on their policies. I hope they do. But again, we want to be aware of what these denial situations might come up. And like I said, I'm very concerned about these claims being denied based on the notion that Ida was a flood, that the backup of sewers was caused by a flood. You know, the reality of that is one thing, whether or not it can be, we can do a pushback for advocacy, because these claims were paid from Sandy, they should be paid from Ida. But that's going to be in the future. I just want people to be aware of these and to let me know about these denials. I'm working with the disaster law line as well. And so they know that we may have an advocacy issue cropping up here. But backup of sewers and drains is very rare on renters policies and pretty rare on homeowners policies. So the property damage claims are going to be only a minor portion of the recovery money that comes in. Now, the flood, because Ida did create flooding conditions, actual floods due to moving groundwater, and it affected more than 2 properties or 2 acres. I have no idea what an acre is, but I certainly know what 2 properties are. You and your next door neighbor had moving groundwater roll into your house. That is a flood, and it is not covered under your standard policy. As I said, we must be very careful about how people speak to their insurance companies, okay? Because if you don't have flood coverage, don't even bother to use the word flood. But moving groundwater can be caused by water main breaks and by rainstorms, okay? And Ida did overwhelm the New York City stormwater catchment system. I do not know any system, even in Singapore, that can handle 7 inches of rain in 2 hours. So did Ida cause the backup of sewers and drains because Ida flooded that, and therefore the denials are okay? We'll need to sort this out, but definitely a lot of the damage came from Ida was from moving groundwater, technically a flood. Only the National Flood Insurance Program would cover it. And I do not expect many people in these areas to have a flood policy, because when I do my flood counseling, flood insurance counseling, we have to look at, let me go back here. We have to look at, in terms of a flood policy, what is the economics of it, okay? What you have to pay for a flood policy? These are moderate risk areas, most of them, none of them, I don't know anything that was in a special flood hazard area that got hit because Coney Island went out with brushes, and well, Red Hook had a number of flood things, excuse me, I'll back off that. But the areas in central Brooklyn and Queens, okay, Flushing, people didn't have flood insurance because it was not required by their lender. They're not in a special flood hazard area. And the cost of a flood policy, when you consider what the deductible is, economically, it's like, well, what is my risk? Why would I buy a flood policy for a couple $100 a year when it's only going to cover the mechanicals in my basement plus a little of the outer perimeter walls? Okay. And my deductible is going to be, $1,000 or $1,200. Why would I have a flood policy? So we don't expect a lot of flood coverage for flood claims for Ida. I really would like to find out from FEMA, from the National Flood Insurance Program, how many flood claims have been submitted in New York City. There'll be a number from Red Hook, but in the Flushing area and some other areas that are in the moderate risk zone, we won't see flood money from the National Flood Insurance Program. So there's another shortfall of recovery money there. Okay, just to be clear, because I love to use this little graphic, here's your sewer mains, okay? These are the service lines, right? And then inside the house, when this water goes into the house, that is where the backup of sewers and drain coverage would apply. When the water comes rolling down the street and flows into you across the ground, that's a flood. Okay, so I anticipate very little insurance money coming out of this, and an issue with claims denials that I find interesting and worth pursuing. So do you need flood insurance? I mean, these are the questions that we go over in my flood risk presentation every month. But one of the things I want to clarify, because it was just recently clarified for me, special flood hazard area, I put in a different, excuse me. Okay. If a property received help from FEMA or HUD for a flood, okay, for example, Sandy or Irene, okay, if it is in a special flood hazard area, then they must have a flood policy in place, and it must be continued regardless of the ownership. The requirement for a flood policy in the special flood hazard area where people got help is attached to the property, not to the people. Okay. And again, you can check out where your property is or where the requested property is by going to the floodhelpnewyork.org site. I'd like to see if we can get into that. Can we see this? Oh, excuse me. Okay. Can we see this? Okay. This is the flood site where you can put in your address and see not only where your what your current flood map is, but what your new flood map, the advisory map is. Okay, Avenue D. This is my office in Canarsie. And let's see if that come up. Okay. I am a homeowner, and I agree this is not totally accurate, but at least they don't say no flood risk anymore. Okay, so here we can see this is the current flood insurance rate map for New York City. This is what we agreed to in 1983, and it has not been changed since, because they were in the process of updating the maps when Sandy hit, which is why they released the advisory map. And the advisory map is what we are using for building codes to repair homes in New York City. Okay, now, I think I'm probably over time now. The advisory map, see all the pink area? This is what's happening in Canarsie. If we go,
we can't see it. Yeah, I'm so sorry. We can't see the map.
Oh, you can't. Okay, never mind. All right, I'm glad you let that. Okay, let me stop the share here. Go to the Flood Help New York and put it in. You'll see the pink areas are where Sandy hit, as well as what the new flood area is going to be. There are areas in Queens, in the Flushing area, that are going to be going into the flood help, into the high risk area. Okay, so let me see. Actually, how am I doing on time? I've lost track. Ooh, I'm getting kind of over there. A couple
more minutes and then we can leave time for
a couple
questions.
more minutes. Okay. All right. Okay, let me, all right, let's go back here. Oops, excuse me. And then I'll see if I can get into websites the other way. Okay. It doesn't matter here. Okay, here we are. I was down here from Okay, yeah, okay. Now, okay, so we discussed what is a flood and what is water backup and the limits of insurance and insurability on both of those. So let's just talk about some of the post-Ida insurance issues. Okay, for property insurance, we may see non-renewals. This is not the same thing as a cancellation. After every storm, the bean counters and the insurance companies go, New York is in a hurricane or in a storm area, and they readjust their book so they can remain financially stable. And they do that by non-renewing policies in areas affected by storms. They are allowed to do a percentage of their book, like I think it's like 4%, maybe it's 7%, without any explanation or any problem. That's just like we're readjusting our numbers. But this does disparately impact flood, storm-prone areas. There's just no question about it. And then if they do allow people who have misrepresented the number of units to continue their policy, there will be a rate increase. And of course, as we counsel people through this process, when we talk about the insurance, they must know that even if they didn't get caught by their insurance company for this round, maybe because they didn't have backup of sewers or drains, so they didn't apply for the coverage, that they need to make sure the insurance company is rating them correctly. Because if they have a fire and they have a 3-family or 3-unit home, the insurance company doesn't care whether or not that unit is legal. They care that it's there. And they will say, misrepresentation, no coverage. So we do have to make sure that they're going to be in the correct risk category. Now, this would cause a minor increase in their insurance. There is a policy that is for homes in the special flood hazard area, a flood policy that is denied SBA loans. This may apply very lightly over in areas like Red Hook, where people didn't have flood insurance, but I don't see this actually happening. This is usually a state-run thing. And of course, the flood program is going to be very different very soon. One of the insurance issues, of course, is that if people do not have homeowners insurance, their mortgage company can force place it. If they do change their number of units that they are dealing with, okay, their property taxes may go up because now they have a 3-unit house as opposed to a 2-unit house. And with the increase in insurance and the increase in property taxes, we will see higher mortgages, more expensive mortgages for people who are doing are escrowing for taxes and insurance. Okay, and that leads us to mortgage assistance and mortgage counseling. People will be struggling with their mortgages for 2 reasons. First of all, because of what I said, more property taxes, more insurance costs, but also because they don't have rents. This again is an advocacy issue that I think needs looking at. Lenders have based mortgages on how much rents you can get. And I don't know, I'm going to check in to see whether or not they have any due diligence to make sure that all the units are legal, okay? But even so, many people, because of the wage stagnation and other economic issues over the years, have added these units because they cannot make their expenses without them. And since we cannot put people back into death traps, we cannot use federal funding to create a situation, a living situation that is not safe and habitable, where they're going to get this extra money from to pay their mortgages is going to create a huge problem in terms of foreclosure. So mortgage assistance, they should be going into mortgage counseling, HUD certified counseling agencies only, please, because other people charge money, they're not well trained. And of course, we have a HUD certified mortgage counselor here at NHS. Okay. I hope you put some questions in the chat. I'm going to put this up for a moment while I look at the chat and see.
I don't think we actually did have questions come into the chat.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do a dangerous thing and just sort of trust people to come off of mute if they have questions. And
Okay.
I see Jill Cornell's hand. Maybe we'll start there.
Hi, Jill.
You're on mute, Jill.
Okay, thanks both to Beth and Valerie. I have a couple of questions, mostly for Beth. So you mentioned about getting the insurance policies forced place if you were not current or if you violated that agreement. Is that both for flood insurance and regular homeowners insurance, and regular homeowners insurance in the case if you did not accurately report your dwelling a change, like if you had insurance for a 1 to 2 family, but you had a 3 family, does that apply, that forced place apply for both flood insurance and homeowners insurance? That's question one. I still have another question.
Okay. Lenders are required to enforce a flood insurance policy for properties that are in the special flood hazard area that are using a federally backed mortgage. If the homeowner does not keep their own flood policy up and running, they can force pay a flood policy, but that only applies to mortgages in the special flood hazard area as it is currently defined. Okay, and which is that 1983 map where virtually nothing is there. In many areas of New York, it's going to double in the coming soon. And yes, they can force place a flood policy under those conditions. Now, the homeowner's policy, their mortgage hazard department wants to know that it's up and valid. If the insurance company finds out that this 2-family home that they've been insuring is in fact a 3-family home, there are a couple of options. They can cancel the policy, or they can say to the agent, say to the homeowner, you need to pay a higher premium. We want some back money for this year at least, okay? And we'll continue the policy, but at a higher rate. Any information that goes in writing, and it all does, from the insurance company to the homeowner will also go to the lender. They are named on the policy as an additional insured. So the lender will know if the policy cancels. The lender will know if the policy goes up in price. They will adjust the escrow if it goes up in price. If it cancels, they will notify the client, the homeowner, that you must get insurance in place, or we will put a forced place policy for the structure in play.
Okay.
So
the second question is regarding homes where the basements are not occupied by renters, but by multi-generations in a single household. So this was, I had the opportunity to visit both the 86th to 88th Street blocks in Queens, and that is the case on a lot of the houses there. Some of them do have renters in the basement, and it's a very unusual situation where the basements are actually attached to an alley. They open to an alley, not to a backyard, and the alley is below street grade. The alley is below grade, and it slopes down from either end of the street, and there's very little drainage there. So that was part of their devastation there. So that question about if you're the owner occupant, because I know someone who is the owner, she takes the basement and has her parents on the 1st and 2nd floor.
Okay.
So is she in violation? I mean, she's not.
No. She's not living there. It's an addition. It's part of her home.
It's part of her
living
home.
unit is above ground. Okay, she's like on the 2nd and basement, or is she living in the basement?
She is living
in
off
the
the alley, but it's part. So technically it's above ground. It's not dug below, but it is below street level. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay. The damage may be covered by. Well, the water, it wasn't back of sewers and drains, it was moving ground.
Oh yeah, it totally was. I mean, there's very little drain, so it was absolutely backup of sewers and drains and the deluge.
Okay.
All three.
The backup of sewers and drains may be a valid claim if they have that on their homeowner's policy.
Right.
Remember, it's an
as
endorsement,
the
not a
endorsement,
standard
right.
coverage. Okay, so, and again, we're seeing disputes on that because, oh,
Right.
it was flood. Visually, I'm trying to see where the water came from, because remember, it has to come up through the sewer pipe, not across the ground. Okay.
Right.
Now, in terms of flood coverage, it doesn't matter whether you are in, okay, they would, because they're not in a special flood hazard area, they would probably get a preferred risk rate policy, at least for the time being, for flood if they wanted
Right.
it. Okay. But again, there's limits to, if you take one step down, the flood program considers you a basement. Okay, below grade. All right. So unless that door opens directly onto her ground, her floor, if she has to take a step down, the flood coverage is not going to cover contents. It's only going to cover the mechanicals. So whether or not a flood policy makes sense, this is another reason why we talk about the economics of the flood program. Does it make sense to buy a flood policy given the limits on the coverage?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the backup of sewers and drains, again, that's where I would go first. And again, I'm inclined to fight the denials, but you know, I'm inclined to fight everything. So
Thank you.
I see a little Irish girl. Okay, does that help?
Yes, it helps explain it to me at any rate.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if they have these, if the bulk of the homeowners in that particular area have endorsements.
This is why I'm saying that IDA is one of the outliers on disaster recovery, because 80% of these disaster recovery dollars are not going to be coming from insurance, the private insurance industry. There is, like I said, I would like to see the number of flood claims that are being processed. I doubt there's a couple from Red Hook, et cetera. And the backup of sewers and drains is going to be, it looks like there might be pushback on that, which I don't agree with, but we'll fight that fight when we can. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions for either Valerie or Beth? Valerie's stayed on for us. Thank you, Valerie. Okay. Hearing none. Beth, thanks so much.
Okay.
It was a lot of very, very good information. Valerie, thanks so much. As I say, Valerie's in San Diego, so the sun had just risen when she started presenting. So I'm very grateful for her joining us. And we will have future presentation from United Policyholders. So we're grateful for the partnership there. And please we continue to look for other ways, other topics as we move through IDA recovery to find the experts in and share with you all the best information that we have access to as we all go through this recovery together. We will be sharing some of the presentations and some of the material that Valerie shared with us. And just so you're aware, New York City VOAD now has a YouTube channel. So we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel, and there are other presentations there. Our previous presentation with the Department of Health and SBP is there, along with some of other presentations we've had on racial justice and equity in our disaster work. So again, thanks so much to our presenters. Thanks for those that participated, and we will see you on the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the time. Bye-bye.
Bye all.